The Renaissance period presents Rebellious Voices, the podcast discussing everything menstruation. Yes, everything. We'll meet at the intersection of arts, literature, advocacy, policy, and most importantly, community.
So would you consider Renaissance period an activist?
So going back to circling back to answer your question, I say yes in just a sense of go to the Oxford English Dictionary and you see the word and see the definition. Did I see myself as that? That's certainly not what I was. That's certainly not what I immediately thought of.
Right.
But
right.
I also do recognize that, especially the reason why this podcast is named Rebellious Voices. I've always been a rebel.
Right.
I've always been kind of pulled to the side sometimes and reminded, like, oh, this is how we do things.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But I've also always been pretty successful in forging my own path and how I would do things. And, people can choose to follow or forget me. That's the whole point. It's not about me. This is not named the Renee Project. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Yes, it is actually called the Renaissance period. So yes, if we were talking about the
romance, those who can spell.
But for instance, look what I named this particular series. So just to go back, however we chop up this conversation for the podcast, but this is going to be a continued, once we get this going where we want to include other voices, but the whole point is I named this particular segment Inside Voices, Please. Because we've all heard that, right? You remember in school, you're coming back from the playground after lunch, and you're walking by. So for me, anyway, the memory is it's like you're walking. We're all on the playground outside at lunch, and then we're walking back in to go back to class. But we were walking by the kindergartners who were now put down for their nap. So like when you got back in the hallway, it was always like inside voice. Like you were outside, now you're back inside. The kids are sleeping. And that is the tone that I want to take with this, is obviously being facetious with it. But yeah, inside voices, please. All right, fine. I'll lower my fucking voice. I have a friend, Richard, who does that wherever somebody is coming off like with something left field or somebody's introducing.
I love it.
He's like, lower your fucking voice. And now let's address the situation. And that's exactly how I'm taking this is, all right, there's all the screaming. And like, I was saying earlier in terms of the way I long-winded answered your question about activists is what I say is I want to stress, we're not a legal entity or anything. So it's not that we're pushing for policy, but what we're doing is we're pushing for, you can be an activist. I mean, look at, all of the different scenarios around the world. Like you said, how you started this conversation earlier about how trauma turns to purpose and then turns into reform.
Yeah.
Yes. On the different element it's in the different buckets. It might be that you start with patient zero.
Yeah.
You go with the person, another person who's impacted or another person who can have help with reach. And then to get to the reform, you're going to go to the politicians or the people who can enact change. The way I look at this, I go back to, my world history studies of thinking about how we looked at feudal societies and looking at fiefdoms and like serfs and how everybody had a purpose. Everybody had a lane and everyone contributed. You still have haves and have-nots because obviously they were still under the crown. But that's what I'm saying. Bump this bullshit about royal family or whatever.
Right.
Okay, I got fucking policies, but are you going to put homeless people in it, William?
Right.
Are you going to use fucking thousands of homeless in there. Why do we need musty old chairs? Granted, yes, I afford Buckingham Palace. But my whole point is
Oh
there
my
are
God, that was funny.
certainly ways that we can look at this, which is,
Yeah,
yeah, you can call it anything. You can call it David and Goliath. You can call it a Sisyphean task. You can call it whatever you want to call it,
call it
but
what you need
still
to say.
understand that this little morsel, this little seed can just keep growing and
Yes,
growing and
yes.
growing. And it can grow where it's as simple as this conversation. And if we were having this conversation at a bar and we
Mhm.
were talking just as openly
Yeah,
and
and those who
candor,
are
like,
earmarked.
what if somebody else heard it? So you could hear two
Yeah,
sides of it. You could hear
yeah,
the side where it could be someone who was disgusted by it and was just like, oh, but they're still thinking about it. They probably went and go
yes,
told somebody else what they
exactly,
were disgusted by.
exactly.
Okay. Or
That's
you
the
might have
point.
somebody that was like, huh, I just heard this girl saying that there's CBD tampons. I never heard of that. And then boom, there's a conversation that has
Yes.
started on another path on that way. But going back to where I'm saying this medieval kind of society,
Hmm.
I'm not talking about just looking at the farmers and the artisans and the engineers I'm saying you can have the lane of I just want to be at peace and I just need my like what I need to be to have a lifestyle that is comfortable for me
Well, yes.
and
Hmm.
with and I don't rock the boat. I choose to like support anybody who is outside of my lane, but
Hmm.
my lane I'm giving, I'm supporting, I am contributing to a healthier society. The other lane could be head down, this is how everything has worked. This is what we are, who we what we do. And you can just continue this fucking cycle of what we have of the world being on fire.
Hmm.
So you can have your pissant fucking people who have access to rockets and have a mental fucking disorder with
Hmm.
their finger on the button. I want to be very careful how I choose my words. You can have someone who has the same amount of passion within their hate. So whatever the manifesto that is written for people to be hateful and to do the things they do to other people, inflicting harm on other people,
They call it righteous judgment. Righteous.
whatever
Uh-huh.
whatever that energy is that makes you causing genocides and causing economic strife, you have to imagine that somebody has that same amount of passion and wants to do better
Yeah,
for the
the
world.
opposite.
The,
Yeah.
the, the complete opposite. It's how do we get this back on the axis? And why I made the very specific gender references is I'm saying it's rooted in very toxic male energy. And so I'm saying, why not? Let's recalibrate. Let's go with a less testosterone filled approach.
Yeah.
Um, and you could
Okay.
have a happy society. It could still mean that person A might just have a little bit larger plot of land than person C, but person C has a plot of land. And person C is still contributing, and person C is not anywhere by any shape or form um, completely chucked out and discarded.
And should be allowed
Not
the same rights because they have land. So
yes,
they should be allowed the
and
same.
not because you have land. I'm just saying they should just have rights because they
Right.
breathe.
Well, humanity. So
Yes,
now we're on a whole different
yes.
wavelength, and
So
we'll pick
yeah,
that up in the next segment because
yeah.
that.
That's another day, another topic. I mean, it's certainly something that I have been doing a lot of studying, reading on the way that societies were looked at. So,
Mhm.
for instance, I have been going back to old texts from John Locke and Adam Smith and looking at like how the world is now in its what's the word I want to use here, in its kind of temperature check, like it's body temp. It's like the best way of knowing if something is alive in the world is right now is based on their capitalism, right? It's based on their GDP.
Okay.
It's kind of like it's like I explained I explained to people like living here in Amsterdam. You always hear, um, the Dutch or other people go, "Oh, how do you like being an expat? How do you like living here?" And I always explain it's kind of like in the US, it's you're born, you're slapped with a social security number, and then you're assigned what your contribution to the GDP should be, and you pay taxes, and then you die.
Wow.
That's what I explained. I said, here it's more about lifestyle. It's about balance. Um, and I know I'm saying that in jest, but I mean I'm really being serious in the fact that if we're looking at the body temp as based on capitalism, then
Oh,
we're all fucked.
yeah.
The whole world is going to burn.
Yeah.
It already is. We're all going to we're just going to, because it goes back to your earlier statement about passion or greed or purpose. Sorry,
Everyone
purpose or
says everyone
no, no,
would
you said purpose or greed. Actually, was
have
the words
purpose,
that you used.
put
But I
passion
throw
first.
in that word passion because passion
Yes.
is the actual thing that combines the
Passion
two,
is the
right?
energy that that
That's
that
exactly. It's the
leads
thing that
to purpose.
combines the two. Is the thing
Yeah.
that covalent bond. Like it is.
Yeah.
It is essentially if that's what our temp was. If that's what the doc is looking for is a good temp on that, then we're not treating the issue. We're treating the symptoms only.
We're not getting to
Whereas,
the root of the problem.
yeah. Whereas, if we need to get to the root of the problem, then we need to recalibrate. We need to
But I
somehow just change. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what do you do? What is it? You let's see, you nurse a fever, you starve a cold, I forget whatever, or
I know
whatever
what
the
you're saying,
old, old wives' tale. But you know what I mean? It's like you need to figure out what the core issue is, and if the problem is those of us are now saying, oh, we know what the issues are, but the ones that are ruling from a capitalistic kind of purview,
but
they're
yeah.
not going to listen to this because it doesn't affect them, and if anything, it doesn't affect them now. It will certainly affect them if the pendulum swung and we were looking at things from the perspective of this is how we are as a society. Here's all the different, ways that someone, like I want it to be so freaking commonplace that my child will know that a trans individual can bleed. I want her to know that. I don't want her to be in a situation where she's going to have her fucking foot in her mouth, and not just from a saving face kind of perspective. No, it's because you want the rest of humanity to be included. You want the rest of humanity to be seen. You want them to be treated as human. We
Mhm.
know there's so many different species of things under the water. We know because science tells us that male seahorses are the ones who carry during pregnancy. So it's the opposite. So it's like, why can't we understand and why can't we witness that within nature that there are so many different anomalies, there's so many different things that happen over evolution and over time. Why are we still beholden to these beliefs that only enriched a certain person that was writing these beliefs? Like, I'm baffled. I'm confused. I said this. My brother passed away in February, and as hard as it was the easiest thing to do was to memorialize him with words. And the only way that I knew I could do him justice of explaining who that man was to people was explaining that he and I, we laugh because we're like Irish twins. I was in '82, he was in '83. And we both kind of got to a point in our teens where we kind of felt like we were aliens from another planet, sent here to observe. And it's kind of weird because it's like, yeah, I look at the world right now and imagine that if an alien did come to visit us, or has, an alien come to visit us, they would go, who the fuck would want to live here? 'Cause I
Right.
don't get, like, if somebody was doing a master class on humanity, I know. I mean, I would love to see a bird's eye view of just how how this that we live is considered successful societies.
Hmm.
There are those that are doing well, but they're not without any of the stressors that still inflict, other societies.
Yeah.
But it's about management. And that's what we started the whole conversation about. It's not that, you don't experience pain, or you don't go through. It's that you learn how to manage pain differently.
Like what you heard? Want to find out more? Or do you just want to throw your radical thoughts into a safe space? Well, here's how you can find these rebellious voices. Remember, this isn't just a revolution. This isn't just a rebellion. This is a renaissance. This is our renaissance.